Despite all the debate and hot takes you'll see on fighting game social media, Street Fighter 6 actually has arguably better balance than any series entry to date, and that's certainly the case when you're talking about vanilla or initial versions of Street Fighter games. There's a DLC character en route, however, who not only threatens to upset this balance in a significant way, he's widely expected to do so. We're talking, of course, about Akuma, one of the most popular Street Fighter reps of all time and easily the most notoriously and consistently overpowered character in franchise history. Longtime fans all but expect that Akuma will be one of, if not the strongest option in the game, and that's because, well, he virtually always has been. In his worst iterations, Akuma might be just one of the top tiers, but in more than one game he's been so ridiculously overpowered that he's been hard banned from general tournament play. It's true that certain characters have seen trends in their tier list placements over the years, but no one's record comes close to Akuma's on this front, and we'd like to take a closer look as to why that is. To do that, we need to go back to the Demonic Fighter's very first appearance in 1994's Super Street Fighter II Turbo. Before we teleport back to the days of SF2, please be sure to like this video and subscribe to our channel for more Street Fighter videos just like this one. It took a game and a few updates, but Street Fighter had finally broken through and taken the gaming world by storm. Developers at Capcom had discovered that they could get players to continue putting quarters into cabinets not only as they tried to beat the game via single-player ladders where they would be rewarded with things like special ending animations and high scores, but also as they competed with one another for the pride of being king of the machine in front of increasingly long lines of eager challengers. Capcom learned to up the ante on both of these fronts, rebalancing characters and or adding fresh ones along with other new content in each updated version of Street Fighter II. But with Super Turbo being the 5th version of the game in just 3 years, developers really needed to offer committed fans some new form of excitement in the experience. If you were good enough to beat the whole arcade ladder without using a single continue, then a new character would appear just before the final boss fight, straight up murder M. Bison with seemingly zero effort, and you'd suddenly be plunged headfirst into a brand new challenge that was unlike any before. Like Ryu and Ken, Akuma was of the Shoto character archetype. This is the central Street Fighter design and thus has some of the most effective and basic maneuvers when it comes to the general Street Fighter meta. These include fireballs, uppercuts, and the spinning hurricane kick, but Akuma's version of these specials were roided up beyond belief. His uppercut, for example, had 0 frames of startup, meaning that it could not be safe jumped against. His fireballs had both faster startup and recovery than Ryu or Ken's, and his multi-hitting spin kick had a ton of invulnerability and could juggle for some big-time combo damage. Akuma could also perform the multi-hitting red fireball, which of course was invulnerable on startup, as well as the dreaded air fireball, which is just an incredibly powerful tool that's insanely difficult to deal with in the two-dimensional fighting game space. He also had an invulnerable teleport for the rare moments wherein he found himself on defense, and he could not be stunned. Finally, though he wouldn't fully get it in gameplay until just a bit later, Akuma also had the Raging Demon Super, a running command grab that would lop off about half a foe's health bar when it hit. Indeed, it's clear this character, who actually didn't have a name yet by the way, wasn't added to be a balanced addition to the SF2 roster. He was added to be an ultimate final boss for the single-player experience. And that was all well and good, as after players discovered a secret code to play as Akuma, he was quickly banned in most all tournament settings, and everything seemed relatively fine. Except that he quickly became one of the most beloved figures in the franchise. Devs brought him back yet again as a hidden boss in Street Fighter Alpha 1, and then made the choice to add him as part of the routine roster in Street Fighter Alpha 2. Developers did aim to make Akuma play nicer and fairer than in Super Turbo, but he still easily floated to the top of tier lists thanks to his foundations as a better version of the game's main character. We should note that he garnered yet another move during the alpha days, the Demon Flip, which is actually a bit of a Swiss Army knife as it has multiple different resolutions that have actually evolved over the years. Point is, it gives Akuma a whole bunch of options all in one. Now a staple of the series, Akuma was brought back again in Street Fighter III Second Impact, and was again broken to the point where he was both an obvious head and shoulders above the rest of the cast and banned in tournament play. Capcom scrambled to save the game by tuning him down a good bit in the Third Strike update, but he still remained one of the higher tier fighters. When Street Fighter IV rolled around about a decade later, Akuma was, for the first time, a standard playable character in the vanilla version of a Street Fighter game. But he did have to be unlocked so as to maintain his fashionably late from behind the scenes sort of hidden boss theme. Akuma proved to be one of the absolute best in every version of Street Fighter IV. The matter-of-fact advantages of having fast walk speed, air fireballs, and basically stronger versions of all the Shoto's basics were a great start, but it was in his ability to take advantage of the game's propensity for vortex and option select heavy play that took him to the next level. If and when Akuma knocked you down, he could use his Demon Flip as you were standing back up to mix you up with the threat of all of its various attacks. As if that weren't enough, players figured out ways of inputting follow-up attacks so that Akuma would only perform them if his foe evaded his initial Demon Flip maneuver. This would lead to yet another knockdown and thus go right back into the same exact situation until the victim was dead, hence the term Vortex. This was a major issue in SF4 as some characters had no means of dealing with it, and so if Akuma knocked them down just once, the entire round would be over. Other characters could do this to various extents as well, and Capcom would eventually add a delayed wake-up option in Ultra Street Fighter IV to fix it, which did bring Akuma down a few pegs on the tier list, but he was still solidly amongst the best in the game. Developers had amassed a good bit of experience by the time Akuma was introduced into Season 2 of Street Fighter V, and made clear moves to reduce the character's potential for dominance by doing things like limiting his standard air fireballs to forward jumps only, and giving everyone various wake-up timings from the start. But this didn't stop the demon from rising through the ranks. Some of the paramount tools within the specific atmosphere of SF5 included neutral space control, corner control and the propensity to escape, and V-trigger effectiveness. Akuma's wealth of options gelled extremely well with all of this as he thrived in the neutral thanks to being fast on his feet and having far-reaching powerful normals, but it was actually his air fireball that could instantly give him dominion over the screen as it would linger for a long while, and he could convert seemingly any successful hits from it into painful combos. For some reason, devs gave him the ability to side switch in a handful of different ways during combos, meaning he could escape the corner much more easily than the majority of his roster mates. And he had a top-tier V-trigger that allowed him, among many other things, to punish opponents who made the correct call of jumping over one of his fireballs. Again, we note a case of him being the best in the game for the majority of its lifespan, only to be nerfed near the end into being just really good. Thanks to his popularity, he's been one of the more common picks for guest appearances in other fighting games. This trend is particularly interesting in Tekken 7, which is a three-dimensional game where characters can move into the fore and backgrounds. This freedom of movement makes fireballs much less effective than in Street Fighter, and yet, guess who's in the running for best character in Tekken 7, thanks but not limited to his damage output, gnarly mix-up potential, safe approaches, and great basic Tekken tools. Capcom has always tried to offset Akuma's obvious strengths by giving him the lowest health and stun values in almost every game he appears in, but this obviously hasn't balanced the scales. In fact, longtime Akuma user Tokido said in 2017 in an interview with Born Free that he'd be happy to see developers reduce Akuma's stamina even further in Street Fighter V if it meant giving him more utility. David Sirlin famously tried to nerf Akuma into being competitively viable for 2008's Super Street Fighter II HD Remix, but even after a laundry list of precise changes, Akuma would still end up with the broken ability to lock players into being hit with his Raging Demon Super if and when they blocked an air fireball. Thanks to his history, being overpowered is all but part of the character's identity now. Akuma being one of the strongest characters in both canon and competition is a big part of what makes him so charismatic, and so devs could be afraid that nerfing any one aspect of him too heavily will result in his not being recognizable to fans, which in turn might lead to drops in game sales. This timidity to nerf paired with him also regularly receiving new moves means a deep reservoir of powerful abilities, and this is what's given him the ability to rise, one way or another, up through virtually every fighting game tier list he's been on. Akuma is now on his way to Street Fighter 6, and the community can't help but wonder how he'll look when he gets there. Will he, as he has so many times in the past, be able to use his many combinations of his many tools to mold himself into being a perfect fit for the particular mechanics and flow of this game? We actually examine what he'll likely look like in the context of Street Fighter 6's drive system and modern controls on a recent episode of Talkin' Block. And we'll just say that the potential of drive rushing behind air fireballs to skip neutral and single input raging demons have us a little on the terrified side. But what do you think? Will Akuma continue his trend of being overly dominant throughout Street Fighter 6, or has Capcom finally had enough experience with balance that they'll be able to tailor his abilities in such a way that he'll retain his hidden boss identity without breaking the game? I've been John Velociraptor Guerrero for EventHubs. Thank you so much for watching, and we'll see you in the next video.